Hey, in this video, I'm going to talk about a way to boost your problem definition skills. This is something you can use when you're in a position that requires you to come up with new ideas for products and services, when you're briefing creative teams, when you're planning a design sprint, or even when you're preparing for a user or a market research. That's right, problem definition. Because before diving into problem solving mode, you and your team really need to have a clear understanding about what is relevant to solve and how exactly your next product is going to improve the life of your users and consumers. One thing that might sound familiar to you is that in teams, everybody has their own way of describing what they think that a user need is. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're in a brainstorm about improving your neighborhood. There might be a discussion about whether a street should be child-friendly or car-free. Now, they might sound alike, but they can actually produce very different design decisions. What are we trying to accomplish? Enabling children to play outside, for example, by installing more playful pavements? Or are we trying to accomplish better health for our children by removing exhaust gases? Or even better safety, avoiding risks of collisions by splitting lanes? And if you think about it, who is actually experiencing that need anyway? The parents who are experiencing fears? Or the children having desires to play outside? As you can see, needs are something ambiguous. It is an innovator's sense of empathy that makes us able to detect room for improvement, but when we try to synthesize it, we turn to language to express them. And that is where things can go wrong. If I'm not careful in my use of language, my message might not mean the same thing for you as it does for me. So it can make a difference between my team designing a pavement game or designing a air purifying installation. So let's walk you through a step-by-step process for a problem definition technique we use at Achilles Design, which is in essence an adapted version of a technique you might have heard under the name called jobs to be done. To give you an overview of these steps, we have prepared you a guide in Miro. A link will be made available in the description of this video or on the page you are viewing right now. So as said earlier, this 8-step process is about a method to accurately describe user or stakeholder needs and is partly based on another technique called jobs to be done. It also takes cues from other tools you might know, such as personas, but more on that later. So on the first page, you will find the why and when of using this technique. The most essential thing to know is that most of the time, there is no real consensus about what a user need is, and that this could lead to difficulties in the project lifecycle, such as lengthy discussions or solving irrelevant things and so on. With this technique, you'll approach the problem space with the mindset that users don't randomly use a product or a service. Instead, they are used to help one achieve a particular outcome. In our previous example, a potential outcome is that we provide a solution to help maintain the good health of children when they are out on the street. Our product could achieve that by, for example, decreasing the presence of exhaust gases. To describe that outcome, we use a recipe, a phrase that helps you capture the user need in a detailed way. These are the parts where you will be working on. We start our expression by stating that we want to help someone. Using this expression or framing it this way will make your team think more customer-centric. We then define our profit pool. This is the audience that you chose to create value for through products or services.
In other words, this is the target audience. If you have personas, they will fit right in here. The next part will cover which type of help is sought for by your persona. We also call this the motivation. And this will be followed by a definition of context, because this will greatly influence what type of solutions you can or you cannot consider. After completing a round of phrases like this, you can detail each of these phrases with outcomes. In other words, your persona will have some expectations about the performance that your solution will offer. To create these outcomes, you will have to start by defining a solution strategy. From physical to digital products to services or even changes in the business model, this part defines the range of solutions you can consider. We will complete the full expression by defining the improvement that will be made, which has, of course, an improvement direction, such as faster or slower, and a subject of improvement. The full expression will look something like this. Help me, a lazy 30-something male, to obtain the motivation of achieving the goal of running 5 kilometers when my health condition requires me to do more sports. For me, a digital product is successful when it minimizes the time it takes to come up with enjoyable routes. The first step is to create a description of your audience. The essence of this step is to determine a user group that is neither too narrow nor too broad, has some clear characteristics, and is worth pursuing by your company. In our example, we determined that to be a lazy 30-something male. It is a short statement, but it can imply a few key characteristics, such as an inactive lifestyle or an age that might point towards more established financial positions and access to paid services. In Miro, we use cards to describe these. There is the advantage of putting some lines of reasoning in there so you can read into it when you expand it. When you have determined your persona, we then add the motivation or type of help we can offer. To help you construct a motivation more easily, we have made a small tool to help you in synthesizing them. You use them by combining the elements of these lists. You will start with action verbs, such as create, transfer, or in our example, obtain, and you combine that with a type of value. This could be something functional, emotional, life-changing, or even self-transcending. In our example, we chose to create the statement of obtaining the motivation of achieving the goal of. You will see that it still requires a subject. In our case, we complete it by determining it to be running 5 kilometers. Now, please note that we can totally change our product outcome by just changing one word. If we decide to change obtain the motivation with share the motivation, our problem becomes something totally different, and a different product will likely to be invented. This is the power of language in product definition, and as you can see, it can steer your project into totally different directions. It is important to note that you don't just invent these statements. I mean, you can, but ideally, you use consumer interviews and use this as a guide to speed up synthesis. On the other hand, if you're only starting out with only desk research at hand, this is a great way to generate your first list of assumptions. You complete the first phrase by adding context. Don't underestimate the importance of this part. Think about the where, when, what time, or under which circumstances this will be satisfied. In our example, obtaining a motivation to be able to run 5 kilometers because your health condition requires it is something totally different than when you are doing that because your colleagues challenged you. In this exercise, you are looking for context that occurs frequently, so you're not describing very niche use cases. This exercise will generate a lot of potential problem spaces, but you cannot go south while going north, so you'll have to filter out the most relevant ones. So before continuing, we suggest to reduce this list by organizing a strategic review. Use criteria such as importance to consumer or the cost of the current solutions to score and filter out the greatest opportunities. By now, you should have defined your problem space with an expression that describes what you are helping the user with. Usually, you avoid solution thinking early on in your projects. However, now is a good time to check the range of solutions you can consider. There's always the reality of your business. For example, your company's capabilities might exclude the option of developing a physical product. Or maybe your user already has a lot of physical products and will likely not accept another one. So although you can do without, we suggest thinking of a fitting solution strategy at this point. In the sixth step, we describe the outcome. To make the analogies with jobs, you hire someone because they help you to do something better and to achieve result, right? This is no different with products or services. Here, we define the improvement we can make to the current situation of our user. Again, we have provided a list-based tool to help you define these statements. It works by defining a direction of improvement first. Use words like reduce, lower, eliminate, or the opposite, enlarge, raise, maximize, to which you add a performance indicator. This is what will be used to determine how good your product or solution is compared to other solutions. You can think of the risks or the physical effort or the amount or, like in our example, the time spent on something. So again, we need to think of a subject and it has to be relevant and logically related to the expression before. So in our example, we created reduce the time spent on coming up with enjoyable routes. Another one could be reduce the risk of picking dangerous routes because we said something about health, right? Or increasing the amount of nature I encounter during running. In step 7, again, you have a large list of expressions that you will have to reduce. Remember, this time they're tied to the help me statements you created before. Reducing your list can be done by scoring each statement on different solution strategies. These can be, for example, lowest hanging fruit, feasible with least effort or feasible within a set time frame. Or you can rank them by determining what is the most valued or most urgent outcome for the user. When doing this, keep in mind that it is necessary to have validated each of these statements first. Interview your users to find their real attitude towards any of these statements instead of working on assumptions. In this last step, you are ready to better brief your creative team. You now have very clear objectives to get creative work, such as a design sprint, going. Or in a different use case, where you are preparing for a research, you now have the input to create probing questions for. Of course, these phrases are still something that sounds highly technical and complex and should be adjusted if you're using them in interviews. But to get a design sprint started, you can take the first part of the expression, the help me statement, as a general briefing, while you use the second part where you describe the outcome as the how might we question. For our example, we can say it like this. How might we reduce the time and effort for coming up with enjoyable routes for running? I hope you've enjoyed this short tutorial and overview of this technique. Below, we've included some more examples of statements that you can use for your inspiration. Thank you, and we can't wait to see what you've created with this. Let us know.